Hello and welcome to Skeptic Haven. I am Rion, and today on Women's Atheists UNLOAD, we are going to ask the question, what if God was a woman? Our special guest, Heather McGinley, will be here to discuss that question with us. Would there be more miracles for turning water into wine? Would the parting of the Red Sea look more like a detailed choreography? Our new host here on Skeptic Haven, Sydney Davis Jr., welcome, has so many fantastical questions for us today. Stick around and we will see where they lead the discussion.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement.
Everything I do so instinctive and so passionate. Every word I move so descriptive like an adjective. I got a vendetta against people who patented being negative when you should be getting after it. I got facts over tracks, this and that.
Hey, how's it going, Ryan?
Hi. Oh my God, it's so great to have you here, Sydney, as a new host. I was thrilled to have you here interviewing, what was it, like last week? And now here you are on the show joining us. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. I felt like I had been proposed to when I was asked if I wanted to be a host on the show. I was like, oh my God, yes, yes. Like I said, yes. I'm honored. Exactly. I'm honored. I'm honored to join the group. Awesome. And for anybody watching, we actually have a third person joining us today. We have our guest, Heather McGinley. Heather is a writer, she's a comedian, and she is also the host of Thirsty, the podcast, which can be found on most podcast platforms. Very, very funny. What's going on, Heather? How's it going?
Hi, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Welcome.
Yeah, no, I thought this was the perfect week to have you as a guest. I thought you were like the ultimate choice for this week because it's Mother's Day. Our topic is about women, and we are covering, for those who are just joining us, if God were a woman. And now, being a former debater, I feel like I should define the terms. And so what we're talking about is like if all the he's were she's with a capital S in the Bible, and if instead of our Father, it was our mother, if it was, the Mother, Daughter, Holy Spirit, like we're flipping the script. So basically, I brought some questions that I was just going to ask you. Some of them are for both of you. Some of them are for each one of you. And just to get your opinion and the opinions of everybody in the chat, if that's cool.
Sounds great.
Sweet. That sounds like fun.
Awesome. All right. So the first one to kind of warm us up is, if God were a woman, would church still be early in the morning on a Sunday? Thoughts?
I think if God were a woman and a mother, yes. Let's get it out of the way immediately and then go get brunch. 100%.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Part of me is like, I don't know. But the other part of me is like, oh, absolutely. You're right. Like, just, we've got stuff to do this week. We've got a schedule, like, get this out of the way, like worship me and then go do the rest of what you got to do. That's hilarious.
I get everything done beginning of the day or the end of the day. So we have the middle of the day. It's just much easier when you have children.
Yes. Do you feel like churches would have like more childcare, not just like Sunday school, but do you think they'd have like more robust childcare?
Oh, that's a good
Yeah, I think they would. I mean, it kind of depends. I know in the South, churches in the South are pretty good about having a nursery or, childcare during the ceremony, so you can go to church. So I think they have that pretty well covered for the most part. In the North, no, I don't know exactly. My understanding, the few times I've been to church, I stopped going to church when I went to college because I went to theater school, which was an emergency exit from church at that point.
Right.
The few times that you go to church up north, they didn't really have as many options in that way. So I don't know if that might be a northern southern thing, but yes, there would be childcare in every single church facility for sure.
Yes. And southern mega churches also have Starbucks. I feel like that would continue.
Yes.
That would be a thing.
Yes.
That would be a thing for sure.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I think it would even be supercharged because I would definitely need my espresso. I would definitely need a very large coffee and a place to put my child, and then everything would be good to go. So
yes. That's wonderful. What about you, Ryan? What are your thoughts?
Oh, goodness. Well, I thought for my first instinct, it was like, no, like I would not want to be waking up early in the morning going to church. But I guess if it's just like that slightly different thing, then I guess it would make sense. But my motherly thing might be a little bit off. So there's always that. Like, that's okay. I can accept that I would be like the odd one out, saying like, no, I'm gonna sleep in. We'll wait till the sun's like right above, and then we'll go out and fry in the sun. That's like my kind of motherly planning. So
Yeah. Well, and also there's the idea that like, just because we are going to church to praise female God doesn't mean that female God is up then. You know what I mean? Like, female God may watch it like a live stream later, like watch the clip and be like, oh, that was really nice of them to do that.
she's
That's
smart about it.
interesting.
She has like playback.
Yeah, I like
It
that.
doesn't have
Thank you
to
for
be,
the
like,
messages.
direct.
Yeah, thank you
Yeah.
so much, everybody, for the love yesterday. I really enjoyed reading them this morning when I got up. That's hilarious. And then I guess you both posed an even greater question that I didn't think about. I think there would be a difference if God were a woman versus if God were a mother, right? Because
Yeah.
like, I'm not a mother, so the
Yeah.
female centric type of things that matter to me may not matter if I were to have kids. Like, I may totally change my outlook on things if I had children. So that's also another question, like female God versus male God, mother God versus single woman God. Very interesting. And I realized as I was asking this, you aren't familiar with each other. Ryan grew up Jehovah's Witness, correct, Ryan?
Oh my
If I
goodness.
Yes,
remember
that is correct.
And
Yep.
then Heather
Former
McGinley,
JW.
charismatic Christian.
Yes.
Perfect.
Exactly.
And so
You're one of the very few people
Funny.
I've ever met that know what that means.
yes, I
Yes,
know what that
exactly.
means too well.
Yeah.
And so another like aspect of the answer to these questions is I'm curious like what the answers of these would look like to like the Jehovah's Witness church versus the charismatic Christian church. Maybe they would do things differently based on if God was a woman.
Yeah.
My next question is, how would the 10 Commandments be different if God was confirmed a woman?
Oh my gosh. Oh, these are such
I don't
good
think I remember what the
questions.
10 Commandments are, other than
So-
thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not lie.
Yeah.
Think about like what
One
they are.
God.
Thou shalt not
Uh-huh.
kill unless you're
Oh.
making me late, and then I'm gonna kill you. Like unless you are the reason that I'm running late today.
Yeah, we do
Yes.
have to be on time. Like, that's pretty important. Thou shalt be on like time for stuff. Like, get it right.
So the 10 Commandments
that one.
are, let's see, you shall have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven images. I feel like that would not be the case if God was a woman.
No, we need images. We kind of need those graven, like, and put them
Yeah.
on my body, please. Yes, and thank you. Okay.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Thou shalt not take the Lord thy God in vain. The name of the Lord thy
Oh,
God.
that would be out. That would be out for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know.
come
I
on.
just think like a woman would not like screw
With the
around with
stick
these
out
little
your-
things that don't matter.
Right.
They don't
Yeah.
matter.
Mhm.
That stuff doesn't matter. Don't lie matters. Graven
Right.
images, who cares?
Right. Like
Right.
women are like, do you know how often I get called a bitch like on a daily basis? Like you think one more
Yes,
time is gonna
please.
hurt me? Come for me. I dare you. Number
Absolutely.
4
I
is
love it.
remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Okay, so here's what I was thinking. If God was a woman, I do not think she would have rested on that 7th day. I don't think she would have had time.
No.
Like, if you had to have a day of rest, what day would it be? That's
Right.
a really good question.
Right. I feel like it would be Saturday.
Yeah, well,
Well-
I mean, that was the original day as
That's
it was
true.
intended, remember?
true.
So maybe it was just right from the beginning, and then Christians changed it to Sunday, which I think we all agree.
it. Men
Yeah.
changed it.
Mhm.
Although I have to say though, like I'm thinking about this, and there are so many layers now opening up because now I'm thinking about like, what if God were a woman and raised in our society? She would have a hard time resting ever.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I've never met a woman who like had time to rest, mother or not. Like, I
know.
feel like they're especially okay. So if a woman had just created a world and the creatures within it, and she had just created morality, and she had just created like sin, do you think she'd be like sleeping on that? Like, I don't think she would. I think she'd be like, this is a
No.
lot, and I feel like I need to be monitoring this before I release it into the wild, before I like publish it live. I feel like she just wouldn't have rested on that last day.
Well, it's going to be the whole thing of if anyone's going to do it right, it's got to be me. Like I feel like that would be the mentality.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
If you're
Right.
going to do it right.
Like, I
Yes.
leave you alone for one day and you're already eating the fucking apple. Like, what? A woman
That I
wouldn't have put the
told
apple
you not
there.
to eat.
Right. A woman wouldn't have even done that. She wouldn't have trusted us long enough to put that. She
No.
would have been like, listen, I know how this works and you're just going to mess this up. So I'm not even going to let you. Number 5
Not
is
even
honor
going to
your.
test you.
Right. Like, I'm not even going to test you because you've already failed. And I know that because I'm omniscient and omnipotent. I don't want to deal with it. Like, we're not going to, you lost the privilege already. Number 5 is honor your father and mother. I feel
Unless
like
they were
honor your-
dead, or unless they were terrible. Then.
Yeah.
Right. I feel like it would just be like honor your mother if she deserves it. I feel like that's like, I feel like if the woman were God, she'd be like,
respect is reciprocal, then honor your mother, and mother honor your daughter. Like, it should be.
maybe.
There would be so many more caveats, I feel like, with the 10 Commandments. Be like, do this.
We'd have
this,
amendments.
that, and the other are in the
Yeah.
play.
Right. If a woman
like
wrote
50 amendments to the 10 Commandments.
Right. If a woman wrote the 10 Commandments, there would at least be bullet points. There would like bare minimum, there would be bullet points underneath each one. Because these are just
except for
like, you can tell with the vagueness that these were written, that they were written by man. I'm just gonna be honest. I'm sorry, men in the chat. That's just I live with one of you. That's how it works. Thou shalt not commit adultery. I feel like that one would stay.
Adultery, unless prior already agreed to ahead of time.
Bullet point, like, unless you are polyamorous, bullet point, unless you have an open relationship.
I mean,
like,
but isn't that the whole purpose of getting
point.
married? Don't you go through those vows? Like, why do you need it in the commandments if that's just a part of?
Well, I guess then we're getting into a whole new subject of what people have agreed to, and like how polyamory works and all of those.
Oh, many
things.
questions.
Probably take us down a whole other. That'll take us down a whole other path. That's a whole other show, I think.
Right. And I feel
So many
like
layers of this.
I also feel like if a woman wrote the 10 Commandments, not only would there be bullet points, but there would be like subnotes at the bottom for like women and men. Be like, women, I know this one, it seems weird, but like I gotta say it because like the men need to understand like this. And like with men, like, listen, this sounds weird. It probably doesn't apply to you, but just hear me out.
FYI.
FYI. And then thou shalt not steal is number 8.
That would stay.
Yeah, I feel like that would stay.
Or unless you're
reasonable.
stealing my look, then okay, I take that as flattery.
Right. Which goes back to the whole false god idol one, which is like great.
You're right.
Very flattering. Let's see. And then thou shalt not bear false witness. This means do not tell a lie. Do not tell stories that are untrue about people. Okay, but gossip. That probably counts as false witness, and I'm all for it.
I mean,
I also think there'd be a caveat on this. It would be, or a bullet point. It would be,
Unless
thou
it's
shalt
really
not bear
juicy.
false witness, but also don't bear false witness to yourself. Don't lie to yourself. I feel like women would add that on.
Listen, can you imagine you're a female god and people are going to the confession booth and just dumping buckets of tea all the time? Like you're the only one that gets to hear it. And you're just like, oh, I love this. I love this. Like there, thou shalt not bear false witness to each other, just to me. Just tell me. I want to hear it all. I want all the tea. That's like, I feel like that's what it would be.
Please tell me.
I would love it. My favorite kind of gossip is gossip about people I will never meet for the rest of my life and I've never met before.
That is the best because it's guilt-free.
It is. And you can just you can just be as invested as you want. Thou shalt not covet, to want something that belongs to someone else. Oh, please.
I think
that's healthy.
Envious at times. Yeah, right. I feel envy sometimes of people, but I love them and I'm happy for them. But I'm not like
right. I feel like coveting in a negative sense is what should be, like I don't want to covet you to the point where like I'm upset when good things happen to you.
And I need it. I want it for myself.
Right. But I do want to covet like I think like having, especially in communities like ours where it's a lot of content creation and stuff, I feel like coveting somebody's success and wanting to be like them is not a bad thing. It's only a bad thing if you're like actively going out of your way to like make it more difficult for them or to, be negative in a certain way.
When you've gone over the edge, when you need to pull it back and go like calm down in a room for a minute.
When you're like using an alternate Facebook profile because they've blocked all your other ones and you're like looking at their Instagram from like an alt account. Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah. That's funny. Let's see some of the comments. Rob Reed says, a woman god would have never allowed love keeps no record of wrongs to be included of the Bible. Oh, no. No.
That hurts. That hits me in the heart right here.
Listen, if you don't want record of wrongs, don't do wrongs. That's my opinion.
Exactly.
If you don't, like, I'm allowed to keep receipts. That's not a sin. That's just me doing my due diligence.
But
If you don't want me to remember it, then don't do it in the first place.
That's what I'm saying. Like, that's what I'm saying. A woman God would have had at least 20 commandments, some to include references to doing dishes, folding laundry, and taking out the trash. Maybe it would have just been more like how to be like a decent partner. It would have just been like, hey,
Yeah.
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 I feel like there would have been
balance.
an entirely different set of commandments on like how to be a good like wife and husband, and it would have had nothing to do with like serving at their feet and like not preaching. It would have been like, do they look tired? Help them. like
Yeah.
like are the kids half yours? It's not babysitting if you're a man, it's you're being a parent. Like that's like,
You're
that's,
also
yeah.
responsible. Well, and probably the command would look more like, make sure you pick someone who is a partner and not someone that sits on their booty.
right.
That's probably what the
Yeah.
command would more look like. Like, if
Right.
choose
Well, if we weren't
choose
rushing
wisely.
to get married because we were thinking we were doing some kind of sin, maybe then we
Yeah.
wouldn't get married to people who really weren't good partners. You know, that might help. That might
Like,
help too.
You're coming in with the big truth there.
Yeah, like if I were a woman God, be an adult, not a grown child would be one. Yep. If I were a woman God, I would make one of the commandments: make sure you live with people before you marry them. Like,
Oh yeah.
try
And
living
sleep with
for a
them.
little
Well,
bit.
yeah, I definitely encourage. Oh, yeah, you got to test the equipment.
Yeah. Yep. Well, also like there are so many quirks that I didn't realize I had until I started living with other people, and then I'm like, oh, that's an important quirk, and I didn't think it was a quirk at all, and now I realize it is. Like, and that's
Right?
totally okay if they don't want to live with that, but I don't want to live with somebody who doesn't want to live with that either. So, you know,
Yes.
like,
That is
yeah.
such a good point. Like, not only are you learning about somebody else, but you're also learning things about you that maybe now somebody else is bringing to your attention that you had no idea
Yeah.
that you did. So yeah, it's a true learning experience. And I think too many people go into it blindly because of the commandments.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. 100%.
Ugh.
100%. Like the number one complaint I get is that I'm always like 10 steps ahead. So guys are like, you expect me to know what you want, but like you're 10 steps ahead all the time. And like, I haven't even thought that far ahead. And I'm like, sounds like you're slow. That's what I'm hearing. It sounds like
Sounds
you're
like you need to speed
Catch
up.
up.
yeah. Sounds like you're slow. Or like another one I get is whenever we're arguing, like the way that you debate makes me feel stupid. Like you don't say I'm stupid, but you make me feel stupid. And I'm like, sounds like you need to do research. That's what I'm hearing. That's what I'm getting out of that. It's like, sounds like you need to do research.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. I would never say that to somebody.
No, it is. I don't know. Y'all are just y'all are making me think about so much today. And I think we're only like 10 or 12 minutes in. But yeah, it's just making me think about how often, especially coming out of religious culture, you know, you get pushed to get, like, the culture is you should get married. Like your value is as a
Mhm.
wife or whatever, you get pushed to
Yep.
get married. And the gold standard is you don't live with them, you don't sleep with them. There are a lot of things you just don't talk about. Both of you need to be virgins. Neither one can already have kids. Like there's all these like parameters. And so people go into it at times without huge chunks of information that then
Yeah.
later, and I do, just because I grew up with so many evangelical friends, not a small amount got married and were like, wow, I've made a giant mistake, because there are things that they didn't know, because they didn't talk about it or get to know each other in those really important ways before they committed to this person.
Right. And some of
Yeah.
these people
Wild.
have never even been on a date solo. Like some of these people
Never.
have had a chaperone to
Right.
every date. And you're like,
Right.
and you're just like, you're living with a stranger. That's wild.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
And
my
like,
first date, I think I was 19 or 20. I was old.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like a
And like,
lone date.
you're not allowed to be alone together until you are like legally bound to live with this person.
Right.
And then there's the whole, you know, sex is terrible until you're married, and now you should actually do it all the time. Like that's your job. It's like whiplash.
That is such a hard left turn to put on somebody, to go from literally nothing. And some of them haven't even kissed the guy. Like I have one friend that she hadn't even kissed anyone before her
Yep.
wedding day.
Yep.
And to go from
Wow.
0 to 100 in like 12 hours.
Yep.
Like how can, who came up with that system? Like that's a terrible
Right.
idea.
Your
Right,
mind
and-
isn't able to just switch back, like switch from off to now on. Like
No.
it doesn't work like that.
Right. And not only to hear all that time that like if you kiss anybody you're gross, but then for your first kiss to be in front of an audience of people, to go from like this is something
Awkward.
you should never do except for your husband to now you can do it in front of everybody. So I hope you enjoy it. Like better be not weird and awkward. Like
No.
Mm.
Well, it just sets everybody up for failure, you know, because I know so many
Yeah.
that like they got married and they cried having adult time every time for years, because you're right, Ryan. Like, how do you go from like sex is bad to, okay, go for it? Like, how do you make that turn mentally? And it just doesn't work that way. Humans don't work that way.
No. And
Pandora's box there.
Right. He says, "Oh, well, I got married without have been on a date without a chaperone." Wow. So like you had a chaperone for every single date? Wow.
XJW. So yeah, that's how they do it. So that is a very common thing, to find you're waking up next to somebody that you might not be able to stand.
Right. Well,
sadly.
And like people make fun of these, like, people make fun of these reality shows where they're like married at first sight. How crazy, how ridiculous. Some of y'all been doing it for centuries. I don't know why you're laughing. I don't know why you're laughing.
No, you're right.
Like,
no, you're very right about
true.
that.
I'm just saying, like, some of y'all literally have it written into your holy text. I don't know why you're laughing. You should sub and take some notes.
Yeah.
But that's so. Do you think that Adam and Eve would have been punished at all in the same way, in a different way, if God had been a woman? Do you think the rules for Adam and Eve would have even been the same? I think Eve would have been made first.
Yes, she would have been the primary.
I think childbirth would be entirely different. I think humans would be like seahorses, where like men carry the babies.
Yeah, well, and let's just say there's a design flaw in terms of a very large human coming out of something that is not that size.
Right.
That's a design flaw. So that all would have
There'd be
been
so
working
many
much differently.
things different with birth, I think, if God were a woman, because it just, and then to get, the thing that bugs me about that is to specifically write in there that you gave her childbirth pains. So supposedly it wasn't there before, but now you're giving her that gift. Oh, thank you. That's how horrific. Like, oh, thank y'all. May I have some more?
You know how like we all thought when we were kids that like you held hands with a boy and like that's how babies were made? I feel like I think that's how babies would be made. I think that's literally, you would just hold hands and there would just be a baby. Like, that's no pain, nothing.
Well, I like this comment in the chat that Kat said about, she thinks they would have been told to eat from the tree of knowledge. I think that is such a good insight. Who are we telling people not to know things, not to learn?
Right.
That's terrible.
Blind submission.
Why not have people know all the information and make the choice for themselves? Like, what's to be gained from not learning and not knowing things? So I like that comment a lot.
Yeah. And I also think the creation of humans in general would have just been entirely different, because I don't know a single woman who would create something into existence that was so faulty and volatile she had to watch it 24/7 and like guide it constantly and make sure that every single thing, like we say, for example, it's a cage full of hamsters, making sure they're all going in the right direction, they're all eating the right thing, they're all following the rules, when she has the capacity to make them inherently perfect and just release them into the ether to do whatever it was that she wanted. I don't know any woman who had been like, you know what, I need more responsibility and chores and things to watch over that I can't trust. I think humans would be flawless, and it would be this like beautiful utopia, and she'd just be chilling. She'd be like, you guys are doing great, you're crushing it, this is exactly what I wanted.
Simplify the process, man. Like, what the hell is going on here? This doesn't make sense. This is not making sense. And 9 months, like, come on, that just seems a bit much.
That's a
truly
lot. And Carrie says, I feel so loved, God, make my uterus contract again, but make sure I drop from the pain this time. Yep. Exactly. Yeah.
That's how much
I feel like it would be an entirely different experience. I feel like we'd be like, do you want a baby? Yes. Do you want a baby? Great. And it would just be there. It would just exist. Or we would like grow it in the ground. It would be like, oh, great, it's our baby crop. There it is. Like, it's been a great
go pick up your baby. Your baby is ready for you.
Right.
Go pick it up.
Oh,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, it does kind of make me think about too how many issues of like power and control are at play here, and I don't know. I'm just thinking about like 800 things right now too, and also thinking about obviously now like women are complicit in some of this for sure. But it does make you wonder, like, from the beginning, if women had written the story, what it would be like. It might be quite different, because they wouldn't have been on the wrong side of the power dynamic.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I feel like there would be a lot fewer plot holes. I feel like there would have been a convention where everybody got together and was like, listen, there's some plot holes here. There's some stuff that doesn't make sense. We need to iron this out. We'd have like a group chat that's like,
Definitely.
parts of this don't match up. What's going on here? As opposed to like, it doesn't matter. Publish it anyway. Like this is,
Yeah, why
you
so
know,
vague? Why does the story just end here? Just suddenly, like disappears out of the story. What's happening? Why?
yeah.
Yeah, come on, let's
The-
I think that would absolutely be the truth if we had at least women writing the initial creation stories. A lot more would have been blanks would have been filled in.
I feel like Mary Magdalene would have had her own chapter from like her perspective.
Oh yeah, she's fascinating.
Yeah. I think she did, I think, have some apocryphal stuff written about her out there somewhere. So obviously she was important to people if the dudes wouldn't have written her out. So yeah, why not have some more poetry and things of that
Yeah.
nature?
It makes you wonder if she was actually quite a powerful figure, and that's why it was made such a point to exclude her. And like, now she's just the whore. Like that's what she is, to anybody who reads the Bible. It's like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, she only got to hang out with Jesus because he was kind to everybody, including sexually immoral people who are obviously the lowest of the low.
I mean,
Yeah.
she was a single woman and powerful, and so yeah, of course they would want to push her down.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and then like there's all those people who make comments like, wow, like a woman hanging out with like 13 dudes, what do you think was going on? And you're like, well, also that means they hired her. So who's who's the immoral one? I'm curious. I'm just curious.
Right.
Do you think that if a female were God, do you think that she would be vengeful, petty? Because we talk a lot about like the vengeful nature of God and how like so much of the Bible is about punishment. Do you think that would be the same thing if God were a woman? Would it be different if God were a mother? If there was like a daughter in Christ? Like what do you think that would be like?
I would like to think. Oh, you go ahead, Ryan.
No, I want you to go ahead, please. This is your show, ma'am.
Oh, well, I'm just thinking about, I'm putting it in the frame of like the most, the feminine, like we talk about the masculine and feminine. So if I think of like the ultimate feminine, I would like to think she would get angry, but in righteous anger, like righting wrongs and those kinds of things. Of course, we know there are all kinds of women, and womanhood is full of all types of perspectives, and people have gotten there in all different ways. So many women are toxic all by themselves, but I would like to think that she would stand for justice, for the underdog, standing for them, helping people that need to be helped with kindness, and maybe instead of control, bringing people together rather than, the kind of the patriarchal religious tradition that we were all raised with. I don't know if that makes total sense, but hopefully I said that decently.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ryan, what are your thoughts?
I agree. I do feel like there would be far more balance with things. Like I don't think that there's anything wrong with masculine energy. Like I just think there's like a huge scale on between the extremes, and wherever you fall is absolutely fine. But bringing like the thought of like, oh, well, what would it be like if there was that actual balance? It's so fantastical for me to think about it. I'm really not even sure how my logical brain is not even sure. It's like breaking, trying to think of like, what would it really be like if we had more of a power balance? I don't even know. We wouldn't even have to have this conversation.
Yeah. Well, and when you really think about it, like so much of what stereotypes a strong woman or a powerful woman is a response to masculinity, and it's a response to patriarchy. So what do we think women would be like if that had never existed? Because so much of what we know about women is in response to religious persecution, moral, social, legal persecution. If that never existed, what would we even be like if our entire existence wasn't a response or like a backlash to having been treated a certain way first. I think like,
Yeah.
I almost wonder like, would half of these things that we think would be the case actually be the case? Because in this theoretical idea, this female god has never experienced a life
Right.
that like, she's not rebounding from patriarchy. She's just inventing existence to begin with.
Oh,
Right.
gosh.
I mean,
The
we might
questions
well
were
be
so
the
good.
villain in the story on
Right.
the other side.
Right. We could be, we could be
Yeah,
the-
because part of like why, you know, society, the way we are all raised, I'm talking about, you know, the US, United States society, because that's what I can speak to. You know, women do get more support in learning to be emotionally available, empathetic, community-based, social, you know, like getting out into your community. That's just how we're socialized, you know, stating it in like big bird's eye view. And I think that's part of informing how we would see God as a woman. But yeah, if it had never been that way, then I think very well we could be telling the same story, but just flipped the other way.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep. Like, men, the reason it hurts so bad to have babies is because you ate off that tree that God said not to. And you know, like that's what happened. You gave the apple to your wife and you were like, eat this. So, you know, that's your problem, it sounds like.
Yeah.
But it's
So
very
true.
interesting. Yeah, very interesting. Speaking, Ryan, from specifically Jehovah's Witness, what do you think would be like a huge difference in what you were taught or what you were told growing up if God had been a woman?
Wowsies. You know what? I don't know, because I wonder, like, would there be cults? You know, because there's always been religion, there's always been cults, there's always
Mhm.
been like specific people who worship certain gods. And I'm like, okay, well, what if the Jehovah's Witnesses were worshiping a female? Would they be so culty? Would they be so insular and dogmatic about things? And like we've said, there could be that extreme where, yeah, there could be people who just wanted to go door to door and tell everybody about the divine mother who can like take them into the into the promised land. So
Yeah.
yeah, I guess there would be that polar opposite of, I don't know how we would be dressed, but I kind of feel like we'd have some regal gowns. Like we would be snazzy with it. Instead of being so plain, I think we'd jazz it up a bit, and we'd have to like critique the message some. There's some things that would need to be fixed. I think we could make that happen. I'm just saying if you guys are interested, but I
We would
think
call
it'd
it
be a better
Jehovah's Women.
message.
That's JW, Jehovah's Women. Yep.
Yeah, there you go. I love it.
Carrie Ann Chrysler wants to know, are there women elders in Jehovah's Witness?
No, they're not allowed to do anything. So that's why it's so out of this world for me to even think of what it would be like for women to have like some kind of position of authority in a setting like that.
Yeah.
No, they have no value, excuse me. They don't have equal value,
Right.
or say. Carrie Ann, good questions, but unfortunately, no, they're pretty much subjected to men. There's like that hierarchy of, there's God, Jesus, the governing body, elders, ministerial servants, husbands, women, children. We're just one notch above those rascals.
That's so interesting. And what's also interesting to me is I don't know if it's the same way Jehovah's Witness, and maybe Heather, also with your background, you had a different experience, but I feel like in Christianity, women are both revered and compressed. Like in the same breath, they're saying like, honor your mother, she bears the children, like she does glory to God by like bringing life to this earth, like she's amazing. Like you can find all this stuff about like how amazing femininity and like womanhood is, and look at Esther and look at Eve, like these amazing women. And then in the same breath, like, but don't teach others the word of God, but don't speak over your husband, but in fact, like don't talk at church at all, actually would be better. Get married as soon as you can, have kids as soon as you can, that's your job, like just be quiet. And so it's like I feel the same way about the way that Christianity talks about Judaism. Like in one breath they're like
very
Jews
offensive.
Right. In one breath, Christianity is like, Jews are God's chosen people. But every time in church, I'd be like, so why are we not all Jews? They'd be like, no, that's not how that works. That's not part of it. Like, stop it. Stop asking questions.
That contract is broken.
Right. It's like, whoa, no. You're supposed to be Christians that agree that they are God's chosen people. Shh, just be quiet. Just be quiet.
Yeah, but they're not quite good enough for us. Like,
right.
That's kind of the way the conversation goes. I remember I was taught a term growing up that like, now as an adult, I just like can't even believe it. People that, so anyone that was of Jewish faith, that had not converted to Christianity, I would hear in church the term incomplete Jews. I was like, what? And like now as a grown up, I'm like,
yeah.
What?
Now you realize like what the severity of
that
what that
is
means,
like,
right?
Just such an offensive, horrible term to use for someone.
Yeah.
So I hate that. But yeah, no, I think you're totally right, Sydney, because there is this whole like holding women up on a pedestal, but you need to be this perfect kind of woman, which is, by the way, completely unattainable,
Yes.
in order to be worthwhile. But yeah, women could not be pastors. They could not be elders. They were allowed to teach Sunday school.
Yep.
But you could not hold a leadership position in church. There was so much about controlling our bodies, controlling what we wore, controlling what we said. Sydney and I have talked about this before. Like, it's even like conversation is so heavy about not tempting men. That if you get assaulted, it's actually your fault. Because you tempted him and he couldn't control himself. Like, that's actually the way that, the conversation around me went, to the point that when I was a grown up, some things happened to me and I didn't see it as assault until years later.
Right.
But that's how the conversation is. And at least in charismatic Christianity, there is this like revered feminine, but you have to act a very certain way that, by the way, nobody can live up to ever.
Yep. And if you lose that revered feminine, it's because of something you did to make that, happen to you, which is just wild to me. I'm like, okay,
it's all your fault.
Right. So it's like, so I have to be as feminine as possible. And I'm not allowed to tell like a man, especially my husband, no, like I'm not allowed to do that. But also I have to protect this like virtue, but like at the same time, I have to be a people pleaser. It's just so messed up. There's just like no correct way to exist, basically. And yet there is, you'll never get there. So don't even, don't try, but like do try. It's just a whole, you're like
too hard.
It's like
too
those
hard,
professors.
it's too complicated.
I don't know if you guys ever had those professors that day one were like, by the way, nobody's ever made an A in my class. So, and you're like, that sounds like you made that rule. Yeah. You're like, why am I like, what? You know that already. That sounds against the rules. That sounds illegal. I don't know. This is confusing. Yeah. Interesting. Do you think that human beings would still exist in like different cultures and communities? Do you think women would all do you think the world would all be a similar type of people? Do you think a female god would celebrate different cultures? Do you think she would want to make everybody equal by making us all the exact same? What do you think that would look like?
I mean, I could say what I would hope. And I'm going to go through it as like, womanhood kind of is how we know it. Because I know we've kind of said everything could be different if it had started out being a woman from the beginning. So, but I would like to think that she would celebrate, our different perspectives, people coming in, because how boring is that for everyone to be the same? But to celebrate different perspectives, different lived experiences, I would hope she would be more inclusive. That would be my hope.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's how it would actually turn out, but I would hope that's what it would be.
Yeah. I feel like what we're running into here is like, there's this idea, but at the same time, I feel like one of the things that all three of us might take issue with when it comes to religion is that anybody given that much power turns bad. Like anybody given that much power, it's a negative experience. It's harmful. So it's like, we could sit here and be like, yeah, I think having a woman god would be great. But at the same time, would having a god be great at all? Like, would that be a good thing? Would having a god be a good thing, but not having religions, like maybe that's the problem. It's like, we can speculate all we want that like, oh, the issues that we're running into with the Bible is gender, but is it, or is it that one being is given so much power and control over all existence on earth that it's like, it's just, there's no way that you can be, it's like how people say there's no way you're a billionaire without having done something like really terrible, right? There's no way you can be God and in control of everything and have all the rules and dictate everybody's existence and like also stay 100% like kosher, stay 100% likable in that way. If no matter what, you can make people do what you want.
Well,
Absolute
you can
power
from a
corrupts absolutely, right?
yeah, for just about anyone.
Yeah.
I think you can take this even from a theoretical conversation to a pretty actually what happened conversation too, and that if we position, I mean, God has no gender. God is just God. And if you really think about it more, the Bible, if we think about the Bible, was written by all men. If you actually take it down to what if the people who wrote the story were not all men, and that, what would that have meant? Even below, knowing that God supposedly has no gender, I think, although maybe I'm saying something that's like not, that's,
I think it depends on
heretical.
what denomination you're from.
Yeah.
True. But I do think about that, like who told the story? As all men. And then if the Bible would have been written by a more inclusive set of writers, what would that have looked like? And then you can just keep going with it. All the church leaders, if there would have been more women involved, if their voices would have been actually listened to, rather than putting them in the submission zone. How would things have changed? How would things have been different? So you can take that into a very like close to real life conversation all the way down the chain. The writers of the texts and the people that live it out every day in positions of power.
Yeah, or even the editors, if there were editors, right? Like even if a woman wrote it, if a man edited it, he might be like, or vice versa,
Yes. Well,
Yeah.
we know that happened. We know that happened with one of Paul's letters. So Junia, they took her right out and turned it into a man, Junius. So they did it right in front of our eyes, and it's only been like for, I think, the 20th century that we realized they did it. Like, hello.
Yeah. Now, to the other point, if God were a woman, as we know, like the modern woman to be, what would the negative aspects be? What would be what would be the negatives, maybe the petty, maybe the doesn't work for everybody, just works for women. Say, for example, in this planet, there are still women and men, what would be like the negative aspects? I think if it were in response to how previous God had been, men would have periods just for the sake of like teaching them what it's like. Like she'd be like, no, you need to try this out and see if it's so
for
easy.
empathy.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. Oh yeah.
Grudge holding, I think, would be a thing in the Bible, probably.
Yeah. There would be more natural consequences. Yeah. I think that would be strongly enforced. Natural consequences for actions.
Yeah.
Like actual karma, like real karma.
Although I kind of like that, honestly. I don't
think that's bad.
I don't think that's a bad thing. Yeah, I think a lot of people wouldn't like it, but it's like, maybe you should reflect a little bit if you don't like it so much. Yeah, I wish karma were like a real like goddess in the Bible who like comes down and like serves, who just like
that would be amazing.
Karma. Like Oprah style. Look under your seat. It's fucking karma.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, womanhood has a lot of toxic sides to it.
Yeah.
Like it does.
But, what is that femininity, or do you think that's human?
Human, because I think actually like pure femininity, pure masculinity, I don't think there's anything bad about either of those. I think it's kind of how we leverage it, and what we bring to that and the actions we take. That's where it goes left or right in a bad way, I think.
Yes.
Because we all know, like there's plenty of, well, I'm just thinking about like, women's rights, which has been a thing for a very long time, hundreds of years, and we always have top issues that we're trying to move forward, are also inherently at times not inclusive. Like there's many examples in history like this, the suffrage movement, they left out, it was very racist actually, so women have, not been the best example of femininity, I don't think, over time either.
Totally.
Not toxic in this femininity. Society.
No.
Sorry, Ryan. Yeah, like toxic femininity is a very real thing. I remember I found I think it was a Reddit thread about toxic femininity, and they were talking about like how women can be just as toxic to women as toxic masculinity can be to men and women. Talking about, women who try to compare like what is real motherhood, what is real childbirth, like what is real, feminine, what is real, like being a real wife versus a fake. Like there's an entire school of, of toxic femininity. There are, just like there are nice guys, there's nice girls, like they can be just as toxic towards men. So I would be curious to see if those things would exist, because again, it goes back to the whole, how much of feminine toxicity is in retaliation or in collaboration with the patriarchy idea, right? Like how much of that,
a lot.
like the trad wife movement. A lot of people have issues with the trad wife movement, and a lot of people think that's like a very toxic movement. But would that exist if patriarchy didn't exist first, right? Like, would trad wives even be a thing if that? And so it's like, it's tough to know of toxic masculinity and of toxic femininity, how much of that is in direct response to the patriarchy that exists already, and how much of that is like naturally occurring because we're human beings and we're inherently flawed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, a lot of women think that just because they are not a man, that they're exempt from being upholding toxic patriarchy.
Yes.
They're, and that's not true. It's not true. Like, just because you're a woman doesn't mean you get to do whatever you want and you've never done anything against women or people that are on the wrong side of power. Like, actually, women are, like, if you think about the abortion movement, women are anti-women all day on that case.
Yes.
Taking away women's right over their own bodies.
Yep.
They don't even know it, and it's just sad to say. And again, we mentioned the suffrage movement earlier on, where that was not pro-woman, actually, and women were a part of enacting that.
Yeah.
So that's something I always try to remember too. When I'm thinking about actions that I'm going to take, like, who am I supporting here? Am I supporting the person that needs help, or am I supporting patriarchal? Or and I think asking yourself that question helps you figure it out.
Yes. Are you pro-woman, or are you pro-woman like you? Are you pro-woman,
exactly.
or are you pro-women that you like and you agree with? Big difference there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's a great question.
Yeah, and thank you to Smashing the Patriarchy. She says, I'm a bit behind in the chat, had to pause. There are several matriarchal societies in small pockets around the world. Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, if we go back into history, like 7,000, 10,000, 12,000 years ago, society was more egalitarian. So we know that to be true, that it's kind of like weapons and things of that nature that gave rise to the patriarchy, to fighting, to wanting what other people had. And obviously, we know things like natural disasters and whatnot can encourage people to do, to go to another country and go raid it because they have nothing, whatnot. But, we know that going back that far, that there was a time where women made more decisions. Look at our indigenous communities. Women are held in high esteem. They might not necessarily be at like the top ranking, like per se, but they're right there making the decisions with the rest of the group. So it's not out of this world to think that things would be way better, but
yeah,
or like maybe different, or like we talked about earlier, maybe the exact same, just with the script flipped.
Just the reverse.
We'd be sitting here like, hey, we are all on a podcast together, like, men, am I right? Like, they're crazy. Did I tell you about a joke I wrote the other day? It's hilarious. Joe Rogan's not that bad.
They probably wouldn't get it. They probably wouldn't get it. Men are so dumb. You'd have to explain it to them. But
who would be the female Joe Rogan? Who that exists right now would be like.
Don't we have one?
I'm sure we do.
Wait, what's her name? Oh gosh,
the blonde?
I can't think of her name.
Tommy Lahren.
Yes.
Oh,
I
have so much beef with Tommy Lahren.
Everybody knew who I was talking about.
I knew exactly who you were talking about.
Listen, I'm just saying she's got good points. Like, that's all I'm saying. Is like, she's got good points. I'm just kidding. For anybody taking that soundbite, I do not support Tommy Lahren. I don't. I have mad beef with Tommy Lahren. Mad beef. I also have a friend who went to high school with her, so we like talk about it. Anyway,
wow.
Yeah, but I just like sometimes I try to think about like how things would be if that was flipped, and that would just be wild. I can't imagine being a man driving a car and like sweating buckets as like a female cop comes up to his window and is like, hey, like, open the door. It's like, oh gosh, I'm alone, like, with this female cop. What's she gonna do? Like, I can't imagine that as a society. I can't imagine like being a man like walking down the street and like looking over my shoulder because there's a woman following me. Yeah. Like, I just can't fathom that. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I personally have never, I don't know what that is like. But
Yeah,
if it
I don't
happens, I'm
know.
sorry. And that sounds terrible.
This whole time, in the back of my mind, I've been thinking about. I don't know if you all saw the original Wonder Woman movie, but there's this whole scene, because it's a matriarchal society, and there's this
Yeah.
opening scene where it's like battle, and they're all like badass warriors, and it's
On
all women. There are no
horses.
men at all. There were all kinds of news reports about women going to these movies and just crying because they had never seen anything like that before, and that they were. I mean, I remember I saw it in a movie theater, and I was crying. Because I was, and I didn't, I'm not a crier either. Like I cry like once a year maybe. And I was just so emotionally moved. I was like, I've never even considered this before. This is wild. I don't know. You all are just making me think about that. Like if you were to really 100% flip the script on things that we take for granted today, like what does that look like? It's weird knowing the way history really went.
Yeah, very strange, very strange. And I know that there were some warrior societies back in the day, not all, but some that like revered women because they were the ones that like gave birth to the warriors. And that would be interesting too. I would be so curious because, there's other warrior societies that were like, no, we're just going to pillage and assault everybody we come across. But that would be like, that would have been interesting to witness too, where it's like, wow, these are literal queens walking around because they gave birth. Like, holy moly, somebody understands like how much of a sacrifice that is, like physically, mentally, emotionally. Like, how wild would that be? Interesting. Do you think if a woman was God and a woman was the one who wrote the Bible, do you think that alone would mean that more women were in power politically? Do you think there's a tie there between men in power versus like religion?
Yeah. Because for a very long time, church and state were the same thing.
Which is odd.
And that's only recently that it's been kind of, I'm not going to say it's fully separated even now, but like this whole idea of
to be.
Right.
Literally the rules are like
to be.
Right. The rules are like, don't do this. Or we're like, no, I think we are gonna do it anyway. Like
It's
wild. It's wild.
Yeah, I think so many things. The laws would have been completely different. Like all these laws about women's bodies would not.
Oh my God!
A lot of none of that's even in the Bible. It's politically motivated, but because it got hooked into church, they were able to get a foothold on it. But yeah, I think it'd be very different.
Yeah, absolutely. I think America, especially because, like you said, that's what I can speak to the most. I think would be an entirely different country. But I also wonder. This is something else. And maybe this is the part of me that's always grown up in a patriarchal society. I wonder if God were a woman, if the percentage of human beings that are atheists would be like quadruple. if men would be like, nah, like not doing that. No, thanks. Like, would America be an atheist nation if God was a woman, or would it have the same weight? You know what I mean? Because so much of why patriarchy exists is because of like the physical dominance, like the physical strength and dominance. If like like we made all the rules and we were women, could they just be like, no, thanks, not doing it?
Well, I think I think caveat, bullet point, if religion had been set up in a way that was more inclusive, less people would leave it. Like so many people have gotten the message that this is not for me. Like I know for me, growing up in the South and, church land, most people weren't, it was for a very small group of people and everybody else was just on the outside trying to get in. So I think if church were more of an inclusive place, less people would leave it.
That's true. No, that's a great point. That's a great point. Like, even if God were a woman, if the rules benefited everybody, they'd be a lot more likely to be a part of the club.
Yeah.
Like, why would
it's
they
just been such a tool of hurting so many people. Why would they? Of course, people are leaving church. It's like, this is not for me and you're making my life actively worse. So I'm going to leave.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And you can see that people are leaving in waves and that's a big cause of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Rion, how are we doing on time? I want to make sure I don't.
We are doing good. We've got about like 10 minutes. So if there's anybody in the audience who has any questions that you would think would be really interesting to ask if God were a woman, please get that in. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah. And then personally for you both, if the Bible were similar but the gender roles were reversed. So, for example, the verse about honoring your husband was actually about honoring your wife. If it was capital S, she, if it were, mother, daughter, would you still be religious? Or do you think it would be just as toxic?
I say just as toxic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, like we've said, I just think like too much power any which direction is not really good. It just leaves too much to be desired and easily tippable, and it's not a good dynamic, I don't think.
Yeah, no, I have to agree. I think anytime you're tilted all the way in one direction, and something we haven't talked about too much is also the idea of two-spirit, non-binary, trans, like that's gender is so much bigger than male
Yes.
and female.
Mhm.
And that is not really part of religion at all either, despite the fact that many people that is their life and that's who they are. So I don't know. Like I would like to think like I consider myself I'm an atheist, but I have spiritual thoughts and I love
Yeah.
deeper meaning.
Same,
And I think,
same.
we all have emotions and things matter and all of that. I would like to think spirituality should have a place for everyone to be who they
Mhm.
are. And if a
Agreed.
religion or the Bible doesn't have that, it doesn't work, because guess what?
Right.
All humanity exists, and that's what it is. And you can pretend all you want, but it's not true. So
Yes. Yes. And I wonder all the time if everybody's religious text didn't say he, father, son, she, wife, this, that, if binaries would have gone away a long time ago, if like it would
maybe.
even matter. Like I wonder how much of our like deeply ingrained social norms are actually religious, and we just don't even have any idea, because it's just been
Right.
such a heavy, even before the United States were states, Catholicism had like a chokehold on parts of the country. And so I'm curious all the time
Yeah.
if genders would even matter at all, other than making sure that everybody had what they needed for whatever it was their body did, period products,
Yeah.
things like that. And I know a lot of people make the argument that like this whole transgender, non-binary, that's like a new thing, that's like this generation. I don't think it is. These people have existed for eternity. They've either just been burned at the stake or had to ignore it and pretend like they weren't. Don't ask, don't tell was a literal thing that existed.
Mhm.
So I'm curious if that would have just not even been a thing long ago, and if genders wouldn't have mattered in marriage, in
I
love,
know it wouldn't have mattered.
yeah.
I know it wouldn't,
Yeah.
because I again, like if we just look at our indigenous communities, like every single indigenous community that I've come in contact with now because of like social media, they have many words for different genders, or like, you even
Yeah.
mentioned the two spirits, and the Hedra community. I mean, there's so many different communities around the world who is just natural, and they're accepting, and many times they've had positions of power, or they've been revered, respected in their community, and nobody has had any issue, and except now that it's been made a political issue by people on purpose. So I know for certain that's part of the patriarchy. That is absolutely colonization and patriarchy, because our indigenous people have taught me so much about things like that. And now science is teaching
Yeah.
us more than we've ever known to back it up. But like, we don't, like, as far as I'm concerned, like whatever science says, like, yeah, sure. But like, people are who they are.
Where Goddess
Yeah.
says, thanks, Dan. That means we have
We've been
ultimate
promoted.
power. Like we're in charge now. Get
That's
ready
right.
for hell. No, I'm just kidding.
Everybody donate money.
Well, this has been a really, really fantastic experience. I've really enjoyed talking to both of you. Heather, tell us where we can find more of your work. We can hear more from you, whether it's related to this topic or something totally different. What have you got going on?
Well, funnily, I co-host a podcast that has nothing to do with spirituality and religion, although I do want to do an episode on purity culture. I think that would be a really interesting discussion.
Yes.
So I co-host a podcast called Thirsty the Podcast. It's all about dating, relationships, life after divorce, and we are out here trying to help women make their second or third or fourth chapter their best chapter. So that's probably the best place to find us. You can listen to Thirsty anywhere you get your podcasts. We're all over the place.
Awesome. And you're also on Facebook too, right? You got
Yeah,
the
we have
page?
Facebook group. We have an Instagram handle, Thirsty the Podcast. We have a website, thirstythepodcast.com. That's the phrase you got to remember. Thirsty the Podcast. We are everywhere you might Google. You'll find us.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, Heather, thank you so much for joining on this episode. I don't know if you knew this, Heather, but this is my debut as a new host for this show. So that's why
Oh.
I wanted you to join, because you also were my debut guest on my podcast, Growing Up Fundy. So, and then Rion, thanks for having me, and thanks for your opinions and your thoughts and
Yeah.
your ideas. I thought we had some really great talking points here. I thought that was really
We
awesome.
did. It's been a lively discussion. Thank you so much. And thank you, Heather, for being here. Make sure you guys in the audience click all the buttons. Thanks for all your questions. And I guess before we jump out of here, I'll handle some of the back end stuff, because we have some really awesome Patreons that help make this show as great as it is. And obviously we have the people who don't even get to see their faces, their beautiful faces back there. And they do so much work for us. But I want to make sure that I thank Eric Ozolos, Tara S., myself. Sure, I'll thank myself. That's what a goddess does. Deneen Murphy, Dan D., Michael Wiseman, Kathy Cotton, Cindy Plaza, Sunny Shell, Aaron Colson, and Phil Calderon. And everybody, please make sure that you're checking out all the other fabulous content that we have here. We've got Secular Soapbox on Wednesdays. The Bible Says What? The Sunny Spot, Global Atheists, Women Atheists Unload. You're watching us now. Hello. And our new call-in show, Let's Talk. Ooh. So please stay tuned. Click all those buttons, share, tell your friends. Make sure you give our special guest, Heather, a follow. Give our wonderful new host here a applaud. Welcome her to the show. Make sure you click all her social media and follow. And stay tuned for more content. Thank you, guys. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. Everything I do so instinctive and so passionate. Every word I move so descriptive like an adjective. I got a vendetta against people who patented being negative when you should be getting after it. I got facts over tracks, this and that. Spitting slow, spitting fast. I could roast, I could gas. Think I'm okay at last, but I don't know if